now should be the time. Deathbed could be tonight. We have no idea. We hold on to this idea. We all have this like I'm going to live forever idea. And then all of a sudden when we're 60, 70, 80, right, we're like, "Oh, I'm definitely my time on earth is a lot shorter." Hey everyone, welcome to Bible 365. I'm Kathy Carter, and I'm bringing you the Bible every day for 365 days. So every day for a year, I'm reading from my Bible, and then I'm coming in and I'm sharing my thoughts and anything else that I have with you. A teaching as well. It's definitely a teaching. I am using what's called the chronological, which means historical order Bible reading plan, and it is available online at oneyearbibleonline.com, where you would go on and you could either download a free printable Bible, like a free printable, reading plan, or every day you could go in and you could kind of click on a link that says today's reading, and it would show you the reading for the day. It would take you to Bible Gateway, which would show you the daily reading. And that would line up with the reading that I'm doing. I'm doing it in chronological order because I think it makes so much more sense. It helps you understand the story as a whole. Not exact, not precise, but really, really pretty good. So our reading today is we're on day 297, and it is October 23rd. And we are reading Mark 14, 3 through 9, Mark 11, 1 through 11, Matthew 26, 6 through 13, and Matthew 21, 1 through 11, John 12, 1 through 26, and Luke 19, 28 through 44. So I'm just going to give you my history. So every day I try and give a 2-minute history, where we've been to where we go forward, because I like to focus on the reading on today. I like to focus on where the people are, not where we are, right? Like, not like, oh, I've already read this, so I can go back and I can understand things. I want to try and be the people that are in here that are reading it, especially if you guys are reading it for the first time. I want you to get an idea of how they were thinking and feeling while they were there and what all of that means. So I go backwards, but I try not to go forwards. I try not to. I do, but I really try hard not to. Sometimes I can't help myself. So here's your 2-minute background. And by the way, if you've never been with me before, I start all the way back in day one. So I'd love, if this is a blessing to you, I'd love for you to go back and to start at day one and to build your foundation, because it doesn't matter when you start. Like, you can start in April, you can start in June, you can start in October, you can start, it doesn't matter. Go back to day one and just take your time and just go all the way through it, because that's really what's important, is reading it all the way through. So there is a God that he's the Lord, and he is the being of all beings. He's created everything. He is supernatural, which means he's not here living kind of on this earth with us. He is a being that is in the heavens, or somehow up in the heavenly realm, supernatural realm that we don't exist in. We exist on the earthly realm, but he has created all things. He is above all things. He is bigger than all things, and he has created all things. So anything we can see, hear, feel, taste, touch, smell, he's created all of those things. The sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the oxygen, every single thing he has created. And he has essentially full control over it. So he can actually, the acorn just fell. I want to say he can like change it at will if he chooses to as well, because he's the one who created it. He created humans in his image. So he breathed breath of life into humans, created man and woman, created a perfect space for them to live in, picked them up, put them into this perfect space. And in there, he had this tree. This tree, in some ways, I guess, was a temptation. He said, this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and I don't want you to eat from it. It's your only rule as you live here, and you're amongst all the animals, you're frolicking with me, and everything is wonderful. A serpent came in, tempted them. They failed in that temptation. They severed the tie between God and humans, and not a complete severing, right? Like, we still are with him, but not as close as we were. They were together, and now they're no longer together. There's a separation. From that time, the Lord is sending people and things in order to bring them back to him, in order to look back at the Lord and say, oh, this is the God that I should be following. And so he sent Messiah after Messiah, right? I'm going to say Messiah, like somebody who saved, right? So he sent Moses, he sent Noah, he sent Abraham, he sent Ezekiel, he sent David, he sent Solomon, right? Like, so all these people that were there, they were supposed to be drawing everybody back to the Lord. And every time they failed, because they were human, and unfortunately it wasn't enough to turn the people back. And so he sent his son in the form of a human, his son who was fully human, because he was born of his mother Mary, and he's fully God. He came in with all power. And so he is doing miracles all up and down Israel. He is doing teachings up all up and down Israel. And he is fulfilling prophecy and letting them know that he is the one. He's the one that's going to bring the entire world back together. He has the power and ability where everybody else failed. He has the power and ability to draw everyone to himself and to draw everyone to the Lord. And so this is where we're starting today. So what we've seen is him going up and down and doing all his teachings. People are following him everywhere. And we're starting in Mark 14, and it says, while he was in Bethany. So he's bringing himself back into Jerusalem. This is probably in year 3, because I believe we've had 2 Passovers already. So he's probably in year 3, and he's been doing all these teachings and savings of people. And it says he's reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper. And Simon is probably no longer a leper. It's just a title, so you know that he was one of the unchosen ones, so to speak. So a leper meant he had this communicable disease that he could die from. But he likely, because Jesus is sitting at his table, he was likely saved from that by Jesus. And that would be why Jesus is there. And that would be why other people were there. And it says a woman comes in, and we find out in one of the other stories that this woman is Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, who he resurrected. She obviously loves him, right? Like, she obviously holds him in such high regard. One, because she was sitting at his feet, so she already did love him and desire to be taught by him. And then there were so many other times, and then, obviously he brought her brother back to life. And so she broke a jar of extremely expensive perfume and poured it all over him, starting on his head, poured it all over his head. So she essentially anointed him. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. So they're like, why would she spend all of this money and just break it and waste it on you? Jesus understands that this is not a waste for him, right? This is not a waste of her time and her money. This is valuable to her, and she finds Jesus to be really valuable to her. Now, Judas is one of the ones who says this, and Judas says this because it says he didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. So Judas had the wrong heart. Doesn't necessarily say that about the other ones, but Judas was like, I could have taken that money. You would have put that money in the money bin, and then I could have taken and had some of that money. Obviously, money was really important to Judas, and he was the holder of money. So Jesus says to them, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing to me. So sharing this portion of her wages and her things and her life is really important. And he says, the poor you will always have with you, but you're not going to always have me with you. So, of course, I want to break this down a little bit. They don't understand at this point that they're not always going to have him. They may think like, oh, well, eventually he's not going to be here. Or maybe eventually he's going to have his kingdom and we're not necessarily going to be as close with him as we are now, right? So again, we know what comes at the end. Very likely we know this, but they do not know. They are living day to day with him, traveling with him everywhere. So they don't have the understanding that he's not going to be there. They probably think in some ways that this is just the way it's going to be until he becomes king. They're just going to keep living this way and sharing with the poor and saving and healing and resurrecting, right? Until the time comes when he becomes king. But he shares with them that that's not the way it's going to be. And that she is doing this, that she is, it says, prepping him for his death. He says, truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. So everyone's going to remember this. She's preparing for my burial. Now, the one other thing that he does say is the poor will always be with you. And I think that's a really important note as well, that we need to understand the poor is always going to be there. The fact of life is that no matter what we do, there's always going to be poor and starving amongst us. And it's important to note, not because we should throw up our hands and say we shouldn't do anything, but that we still do everything and anything that we're supposed to do. But our end game isn't necessarily to fix everything. Our end game is that we are called partially we are called, as he was saying in prior days, right, when he was talking to them privately in other places, we are called to share our wealth because actually our wealth is not good for us. So we are called to share all of what we get, and that's better for us to share those things. It's not to solve the poor problem. It's because for us it is a desire to share all that we have with anyone who does not have, and we're supposed to be doing it in a loving way, right? But not to solve the problem. We're never supposed to be working, I don't think we're ever supposed to be working to solve a problem. What's here is here until the Lord comes back again. We are just supposed to be doing the Lord's desires until he comes back. It's part of our making ready for the Lord to come back. Meanwhile, it says, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus. So he had Lazarus with him as well. So he had Simon the leper, who he healed, and he had Lazarus, who he resurrected from the dead. And people were coming to see him, not because they were so excited, like, oh my gosh, let's see this amazing thing that Jesus has done, but because they actually wanted to kill both of them. So Lazarus was proof that Jesus was able to resurrect people from the dead. And so they wanted Lazarus gone as much as they wanted Jesus gone. After this, then they left there, and then they started approaching Jerusalem. It says, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you and go get a donkey. So he also said an untouched donkey. And so it seems to me that we're going back to some of those Old Testament ideals where he wants a clean, unblemished donkey. So one that has never been ridden, which I think is under that same guise of, remember when they would bring sheeps and everything to them, it would be like the best of the best. I think this is the same thing where he wants this untouched donkey. Now, I want to give a little thing about a donkey, because like, why would he come in on a donkey? Why does any of that matter? Kings actually did come in on donkeys. And I always thought that this meant it wasn't a horse, so it meant that he was lower than. But it's actually not what it means. If you go back historically, if kings came on donkeys, it meant they were coming in peace. If kings came on horses, they were war horses and meant they were coming for war. So there is an idea that Jesus was coming as a king on a donkey in peace towards the temple. So he was traveling towards the temple in peace. He's not coming for war. He's not coming to destroy everybody. He's coming to draw everybody to him in order to be turned to God, right? So this is his peaceful way of coming in. So they found this donkey, and then they brought him in, and then when they brought the donkey back, they laid their cloaks all over the donkey and then allowed Jesus to sit on them. And then as Jesus was riding in, everyone started throwing their cloaks on the ground. And to me, this was a sign, because their cloaks were, and I think I discussed this at another time, but their cloaks were really important to them. It could have been shelter. It could have been the thing to keep them warm, the thing to keep them safe and protected from rain, from any, right? Like it was, and it was more than a coat, because they didn't have coats in the way that we did. Like, you know, we have a million of them. A lot of us have coats for anything and everything, and that's not the way they did it. They would have a cloak to keep them protected. And so they were laying their protection on the ground in order to allow Jesus' donkey to come in and walk on that. So there's an understanding there that they were kind of getting that this guy was the guy. Now, again, do they have full understanding? Probably not. But are they understanding, like, this guy's a pretty spectacular prophet. This is pretty cool. And we want to make sure that he comes in a really good way so people recognize him. And then maybe at this time he's going to be king and he's going to be elevated above, right? Like they were trying to give him power. And then they were calling out, Hosanna. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. And this is a fulfillment of prophecy. So if I go over, it's a prophecy in Zechariah 9:9. So if you go over to that Matthew 21, it says, say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So this is the Zedekiah prophecy that is fulfilled here, right? The guys who wrote these books are like, okay, here's another prophecy that was written back in the Old Testament that he fulfilled. And in some ways, like, I think he knew he was going to fulfill it, but they didn't maybe necessarily know he was going to fulfill it. And afterwards they went, oh my gosh, this is that prophecy that we read back in by one of the prophets in the Old Testament. And so Hosanna also means to save. So when they were calling out to him, they were shouting at him to save. So again, they are recognizing who he is. He says down in the Luke version, Luke 19:40, it says, I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, because they were told to tell the people to be quiet. If they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. And when we move over into this Luke 19:41, it says, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. So he's like, even the stones are going to cry out. There is something, and this is in my mind that I've said a few times, there is something important that it's not just the people that broke way back in Genesis. It's the people and it's the land. And I believe God has, on a few occasions, not all, but on a few occasions, he has spoken directly to the land. So I'm going to give one example. I had a couple, but I'm going to give one. When he comes down for Sodom and Gomorrah, he said, the land cries out to me. Now, we could assume, and I'm sure a lot of people have, and actually I tried to read up on this and see if anyone else thought anything differently, and they don't. Everyone kind of thinks it's the people. But the land is actually crying out to them in Sodom and Gomorrah. So the ground is like, this place is such a mess. And the people aren't shouting out to you, but they're making such a mess of us that we need you to come down and look and see what's going on. That's the way that I see it. And I actually see it here as well. I think he's talking to the land. He's weeping over the city, and he's like, so he's crying over the city. And he's like, if you, even you, I think he's talking to the land. We could take it both ways. So I'm just saying me. If you had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it's hidden from your eyes. So eyes obviously could be the people, but anyway, it's hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you. I think this is the nation of Jerusalem, and that which he's talking about. And encircle you and hem you in on every side. They're going to dash you to the ground. So they're going to destroy Jerusalem. You and the children, not actual children, but the Israelites, the people that are inside your walls. They're not going to leave one stone on another because you didn't recognize the time of God's coming to you. There's some culpability. I know it's going to sound weird. There's some culpability in the land also. So again, if we go back to that Sodom and Gomorrah thing, they cried out. They were like, it's a mess here. And they cried out. And Jerusalem is just letting everything happen. Please take it with what you will. But I really think that we are in some ways completely symbiotic, right? Like I think that he has a requirement of, we were responsible. So way back in Genesis, we were responsible for everything. He said, you take care of the animals and the land. And we didn't. We broke that promise, right? So like we messed that up, and we broke not just the heart of the human, but we broke the perfectness, the perfection of the land, right? This is why animals die. This is why sacrifice had to be made in order for the people, because there's a connection between us and the land. And so I'm going to say we, in general, the humans, are responsible for all of it. But it looks to me like there's some culpability on the land as well. And so everything is responsible, because it says the stones cry out to me. And that's why the other thing, the stones cry out. Does he mean it metaphorically? I actually don't think he does. I think everything cries out to the Lord. The animals do their purpose. The land is doing exactly what it's supposed to do right now. The trees are supposed to lose their leaves as the seasons change, and they're falling. And then what that's going to do is that's going to then go into the ground, and then that's going to create new life. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But here, somehow it also was not doing what it was supposed to do. And so he's like, this whole land is going to be destroyed. What was here is no longer going to be here. Moving down into John 12, it says, now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. They said, we want to see Jesus. So there's Greeks, these non-believers, right? These, again, they're completely outside of the community, came in where they were like, hey, let's go see Jesus. Philip went to Andrew, and both of them were like, hey, let's go, let's ask Jesus. And Jesus replies, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I am thinking that the outsiders coming and asking to see him are a sign to him that he's recognizing now that the time is coming. He's no longer just with the Israelites anymore. Now all these outside nations are like, we want to get in on this too, right? Because again, remember when I mentioned with the woman not that long ago where he said something about feeding the dogs. The centurion loved God, helped the Israelite people. That woman didn't. The Greeks also didn't, right? They had nothing to do with God. But now they're coming in and they're going, we want to see who this Jesus guy is that you have. And so now he's like, okay, it has now been the right amount of time and my time has come. It says, the hour has come for him to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies. So now he's telling a story, falls to the, again, probably a metaphor, right? It remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. So when a seed goes in, like, so one thing has to die in order for a ton of things to spread and grow. Like I said, how all of this stuff works, right? So we see that some things need to die in order to have a bigger growth. Like a tomato, all the seeds inside the tomato can go into the ground and grow more tomatoes, not just the one that died. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. And he says, now my soul is troubled because he knows his time is coming. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, this is why I came. By the way, he says a lot of things like this is the reason why I'm here. This is the reason why I came. It wasn't just for one thing. It was actually for many things. And he says, so he's like, as a human, he's getting troubled by it, right? Because of the things that he knows he has to go through. But he's not going to protect himself in order to not save the nation. He recognizes it's more important, right, for that seed to die, go into the ground, and to spread new seed. Then a voice comes to heaven and says, I have glorified it and will glorify it again. The crowd that was there heard it and said it sounded like thunder, and others said it sounded like an angel. Jesus says, the voice was for your benefit, not mine. Like, I don't need to hear my Father. I know my Father. But it was for everyone in there to hear. And he says, now is the time for judgment on this world. The prince of the world is going to be driven out. And when I'm lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. So he says the prince in this like outward third person area. And then he follows up with I, recognizing that he is the prince, right? Because he's the son of God. He's the prince that's going to be driven out. The crowd spoke up and says, we have heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. How can you say he must be lifted up? And Jesus says, you're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. So he's calling them now to himself. I am giving you a warning. It is almost over. Your time to come and join me is coming to an end. Come here while I'm still here. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of the light. And I'm essentially like, wake up, stop wasting your time. This is what some of us do every single day. Every day we go, one more, just one more of this and one more. If so-and-so can do it on their deathbed, I can surely do it on my deathbed. And he's saying, now should be the time. Deathbed could be tonight. We have no idea. We hold on to this idea. We all have this like, I'm going to live forever idea. And then all of a sudden when we're 60, 70, 80, right, we're like, I'm definitely, my time on earth is a lot shorter. And so every single day we get closer to that. We start to recognize that we're closer to that. Do not wait. There is no sense in waiting. It is better here to have it on earth anyway than to not have it on earth. And somehow we think that the prize is all that fun we get to have. And then you give up everything in order to take the Lord. And he's like, stop thinking that way. Stop wasting all of your time and come to me now while it is light, while the light is here among you. And some of them will, and some of them won't. And that's where we're ending for today. So guys, if you have stuck with me through all of my like mess ups and all kinds of crazy stuff that I've been going through, I want you to like, share, and subscribe. I hope it's been a blessing to you. And I want you to comment, especially if you guys are new. I've had some new people join the channel, which I'm really excited about. So give me a shout out. And I want you to keep reading. Make sure you read for tomorrow. And I'll see you guys next time.